Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. We are here today with Lee Camp. Lee Camp is a stand-up comedian and a political satirist. He is the host of Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp on RT America. He created the Common Censored podcast along with Eleanor Goldfield, which focuses on grassroots activism issues. Camp is the author of the new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. After you take a look just of that table of contents, you're going to say, all in one place? I got to go ahead and get this thing, man. Anyhow, Lee Camp, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today, buddy?
Thanks. I'm doing well. I think by the end of this interview, we'll have that earth behind you all fixed up.
Yeah, I think that's what we're getting to, because let me tell you something. In reading the foreword to your book, right, you got the best. I really love Chris Hedges. That's one of my guys, okay? I've interviewed him a couple of times. I like his point of view, all of that. And here's what he said in the foreword to your thing. I know you said it, but the audience doesn't know it. There are two types of comics. There are those who focus on the foibles and excesses of the powerful, and there are those such as Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore, as well as the late George Carlin, who focus on how the powerful are the public face of oppression and exploitation. If anybody wants to hear something, that is what you want to hear, especially in these times. So before we get into the meats, the guts and bolts of these issues, who the hell is Lee Camp?
Well, I don't know. You put me on the psychiatrist couch. I might start weeping quietly here in a moment. But no, I think, Chris has a great point that, I've been a touring comedian for over 20 years, so I've met all kinds of comedians, and it's not that they're not talented, it's not that they're not funny, but there's many out there that are pretend as if they're addressing some sort of, politics or something, but they're not really going at the powerful. They're not really going at the core of the issues. They'll have a few Trump jokes here or there. And, this is what we have now filled our late night television with. It's just, standard Trump jokes. Before that, it was, standard Bush jokes or whatever, some Obama jokes, but it never really gets at the core of the issue of our ruling elites, the oligarchy in which we now live, the crumbling of any remnants of democracy, the military-industrial complex that is funded more largely than most nations. It doesn't get at all of that. It just says, oh, that guy acted funny or that guy tweeted something funny, which is not really challenging the powerful.
Now, here's the funny thing, all right? You gave a symptom of a problem. The symptom of this problem is they are saying what they are allowed to say, given the avenues that they are using to transmit what they want to put out there. And here comes the sticky point that I'm going to hit up with you. You are on this network called RT America.
I haven't heard of it.
And, it's funny because, I get a lot of flack. In fact, after I present this interview, I will get a lot of flack. But
you seem tough. I feel like you can handle it.
Oh, you bet your life I can. But it is interesting because here's the deal. A lot of the reasons you are able to say the things that you say is because you are using a platform. And it's not necessarily that you like any platform, because you should not like any platform. You are just using things as a medium. But you're able to say what you want to say.
Yeah, and it's incredibly rare. I had given up the idea, like I said, to stand-up comic for 20 years. I had given up the idea of ever having a television show because the corporate networks are not going to allow the things I talk about. They might allow a little criticism of Amazon here or there, a little criticism of an oil industry here or there, but they're not going to allow it to be the main message of what you're talking about is the corporations extracting the wealth in our country and leaving people miserable and poor. And, they're not going to let you go at their advertisers on a daily basis. And so I had given up with the idea that I would be on TV that much or especially ever have a show. So I ended up in this bizarre scenario where at RT America, I am allowed complete freedom. And here's another unusual point of my comedy. I write everything I say. I research everything I say. Unlike all these other comedy news channels, and I'm not saying they're bad comedians. I'm just saying, you know, that if I say something, I wrote it. No one's writing my scripts. No one's telling me what to say. No one's ever told me not to say something. It really is complete freedom. And you compare that to what you see from even just newscasters on MSNBC. I mean, the number of people they've fired for pushing a little too hard against their borders, such as Ed Schultz,
To some extent, Cenk Uygur.
Phil Donahue, Cenk Uygur, you can go down the list. Jesse Ventura, actually, many people don't know, he had a multi-million-dollar show with them, and they found out he was against the Iraq War, and he was paid millions of dollars just to get out of his contract, just to go away and not talk about it.
That shows a power.
Yeah, the power and how scary it is to even MSNBC. We're not even talking about like Fox News, but even just MSNBC, how scary it is for them to have anyone who's anti-war. It cannot happen on their airwaves. And so it is incredibly rare that I have this ability to be free and talk about what I want and cover what I want. And like you said, when you do, you will get attacked maybe just for having me on your show. And imagine the attacks I get, and it's by design. You know, when you really stand up against war on a large platform and stand up against the corporate entities that really rule our world, the white blood cells will activate and they will attack the infection. And anyone speaking for peace is the infection. And those white blood cells are the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, Fox News, all of them. And they will not put up with it.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought those news rags up. I use all of them, including every single one that I've seen you use annotated with all your articles. And what I want people that are listening to understand, right, is the things that you write about, these articles that you write about. I mean, look, I'll be frank. There are a couple of them that I am not 100% in agreement of, but if that were the case, we would have cults and not intellectual discussions. Okay.
Sure.
Now, that said, all of your articles are well annotated, but not only that, they're not using singular sources, which means you are using the plethora of avenues of news sources out there, something that we don't do in America. We go overseas and we see articles that also gives a presentation of news. You can't just look at people with an agenda, our current news rags, to do that. So I would urge people to take a second look. One of the things that I promised to do with Politics Done Right is always to keep that door open for voices that are not heard in general. And again, we take hits for that, but the thing about it is, you generally take the hits after the voices are heard. And when you throw something out of the bag, it's already out of the bag, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's important, and I think that people, even on smaller platforms, if they're talking about these things, it's why you're seeing movements like Black Lives Matter and defund the police, and you create a thought seed in people's minds that can grow. And so, ultimately, when I was deciding whether I even wanted to create a show at RT America, when they offered it to me, what my main decision or a big point of it was, I don't think we have a lot of time left. You know, look at the photo behind you. Like that, I know that I get that that's a hyperbole, but it's not far off. You know, a lot of the world is on fire right now, and we don't have a lot of time to screw around. So if everyone who actually is speaking for peace, who actually is against war, pro-war propaganda, who's actually wants people, you know, everyone to not be living in poverty and to have a roof over their head and things like that. And if all those people waited for the perfect opportunity to ever speak out, for the perfect platform that is, solely run by vegan, multicultural people with, who struggle with Asperger's, you would never have it. It would never exist. There'd be no place to ever speak your mind. So the truth is, in order to speak out within our unfettered capitalist system, you have to live in that world, and you have to try and get the message out on the platforms available.
Hey, Lee, some funny just came out, man. You actually left the politics for a while and some funny came out, brother. What's up with that?
Well, don't ask me serious questions if you don't want serious answers.
Anyhow, hey, listen. I'm gonna tell you first of all, folks. Let me tell you the book that you're gonna see on the screen right now. Notice the congruence between the picture of his new book and this background here. You know, guess what? It's all by accident, but it also shows something that is very important. We are all coming to the same conclusions. We're all coming to the same conclusion. Lee, tell me now a little bit about these articles in the book. As I said, a lot of it is not new to me because I've read your articles before. I've reblogged your articles before because I think you're a damn good writer.
Thanks.
And not only are you a damn good writer, and folks, yes, I'm saying that about Lee Camp, but he researched what he writes. And in these days where everybody tries to censor what they're, and a lot of times self-censoring, he doesn't. Tell us a little bit about what you wrote about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some comedy in there as well, but the points of the articles are dead serious, and I tried to hit mainly on the things people don't know. So I spent more time on that than things that I might believe that are obvious. Like Trump is a moron, or Joe Biden is a racist, or whatever. So while I may know those things, I feel like people already know those things. So I focused on things I felt like people did not know, like the $21 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments in the Pentagon's budget. And there's now, by the way, since that article, there's now reports that it's even higher than that. But it is, and that's trillion with a T. I mean, for people that haven't read about this is the Pentagon's own budget, own financial analysis. This is not coming from some blog. This is their own analysis showing that they have $21 trillion or more of unaccounted for adjustments. No one knows where this money's flying, what's happening to it. It's absolutely insane. And you can hardly get a politician or someone in one of the legacy media outlets to even talk about it, other than to write a 1-paragraph article where they try and pretend it's nothing. So it truly is incredible. Other things I cover in there are, the 18 biggest things that WikiLeaks revealed to the world, because most people, obviously, Julian Assange continues to be persecuted, and most people don't know the totality of what WikiLeaks has revealed. Not a word of it has ever been proven false, meaning everything they've ever published is correct, which is the opposite track record of CNN or Fox News or something. And the things they revealed, which have changed the world, they revealed what was in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They revealed internal documents about governments around the world, not just America. We're talking Britain, Australia,
Panama Papers.
Peru. What's that?
Panama Papers.
The Panama. Well, I don't think they revealed the Panama Papers. I think.
Oh, okay.
That might have been someone else, but yeah, they've done incredibly important stuff. And it's like people, people like to think, oh, he's imprisoned because he was out to get America and now they've stopped him. But he was pro-transparency of all governments. I mean, he revealed things about Australia, Britain, Russia, China, and that is why these governments, Britain, Australia particularly, are not assisting in freeing a publisher. Anyway, so I get into that. But yeah, I really try and focus on things people don't just kind of commonly know. And
well, I think you're missing an important thing you covered too, Lee, and that's talk about coups.
What's that?
About coups.
Coups.
C-O-U-P, C-O-U-P.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do talk about, especially, the ones the U.S. has backed or tried to create, in Venezuela, putting up this ridiculous puppet, so-called
Guaido.
president. He claims he's president despite the fact no one's ever elected him president. Not a single vote has been cast for Juan Guaido as president. And we now know his connections to big oil and everything else. John Bolton, when he was in the Trump administration, publicly on Fox News says we want to get into Venezuela to get the oil. They're not even keeping this stuff a secret now. It's truly horrific.
Now, Lee, let's talk about, we know the problems. Anybody wants to see all the problems, they can go to your book now. They should actually get, this type of writing, these types of articles are right down the center of my heart, because again, I think these are things that all Americans, if they knew, they would make different choices in who they elected. So we know that. So this is a good primer for Americans to find out all the things that they generally don't hear in the mainstream media. And even though a lot of this material is sort of in an ancillary way covered in some of the mainstream media, they're there for completeness but hidden. So we know that a lot of this is exposed. You expose it in your book. Hedges and others do the same. Where do you see us going from here? What is your opinion of a next step in the activist community to actually not be able to throw our hands up and scream and say, these are the bad things happening? How do we actually effect change?
Well, I think you could see, we probably should, model after the things that have been successful and the organizers out there that are creating successful movements and large scale movements. We saw, it's obviously not over, but we saw how quickly the discussion around policing in America has changed over just a matter of months. Whereas for years, activists have been trying to get politicians in this state or that state to enact real change, to change our police system, and it just doesn't happen. But when you have millions of people out on the streets, all of a sudden you see a quick adjustment of what people are willing to talk about, the discussions they're willing to have, and obviously it has to continue. You can't just get Black Lives Matter written on a street and then go home. But I think it needs to be modeled after the successes. Another huge success has been, we're seeing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Dominion and Duke Energy have thrown in the towel on that one. And the reason they threw in the towel is because of a combination of protesters stopping pipelines with protests and lawsuits have just made it too expensive to keep trying to put in this billion-dollar pipeline. So there are big wins right now against big oil because the big oil structure is collapsing, and we need it to collapse so that the whole planet's not on fire in a few years. These are pivotal times, but I think we need to look to the activists that are not just making it about electoral change. Yes, vote. Yes, we should try and beat what's stolen in the vote, especially in local races. Politicians can be important and can be rightfully elected. But if that's your only focus, then you're not actually creating change. Our focus needs to be much larger than just electoral politics.
Expand on that. The focus should be larger than electoral politics. Other than electoral politics, how do we further effect change? I know what we're doing on the streets are actually affecting electoral change. What else can we do?
Well, the big win I just said was these protesters in the pipelines. That came through a combination of the courts and protesters literally sitting in front of construction equipment and saying, you got to run me over, and they were arrested, and sometimes they end up facing lengthy lawsuits and crap like that. But it has slowed down the oil companies to the point that they have thrown in the towel on that one, and other ones are facing other legal problems. Dakota Access was just put on hold. Keystone Pipeline was just put on hold. So anyway, I was just using those as an example of a tactic that is working.
I like that, because you said what I was hoping that you'd say. In effect, there's electoral politics and there's also disruption. And because the capitalist necessity of some sort of order, they have to slowly attempt to accommodate. I tell you something, I was surprised how fast the system reacted, starting with the police and George, but I think I don't know if you've thought about this. I think there's some internals within our CIA and intelligence infrastructure that saw a whole lot of happenings. No government reacts as fast as I saw them react to start making changes wholesale across the country. There's something else out there that, in my opinion at least, we don't know about, that causes a Biden to come out and say, well, you know, if the politicians are not tearing down statues, and I know we don't necessarily need only tearing down statues, but we need to tear down statutes. But I mean, it is funny that Biden comes out and says, well, if the politicians don't do it, can you really blame the people who are doing it on their own? That was kind of strange to me.
Well, I think, you know, he's a little bit scared. I've been critical of him for, he basically says he supports Black Lives Matter, yet as far as I've seen, he hasn't come out in favor of almost any policy of Black Lives Matter. So, you know, Biden, they're hoping Biden will just roll into the White House without having to actually stand for anything, which I think is pretty pathetic. But you're right that a lot of politicians have quickly changed their tune, and it's because they started to fear for the kind of business as usual. I mean, you interrupt business as usual, and you'll see change rather quickly. Another important step, I think, is to really make certain brands toxic if they're not treating people right. A good one that everyone's been working on right now is Chevron, because Chevron has this lawyer, Stephen Donziger, that they've had under house arrest for a year now for basically winning an environmental lawsuit against them. And anyway, you make these brands toxic enough, and they will either have to sell or they'll have to change. Monsanto became so toxic, the brand, that they had to sell to Bayer. And now Bayer is facing billions of dollars in lawsuits for the carcinogenic Roundup herbicide. So it's kind of a combination of activists on the ground and lawsuits.
Now, Lee, before I ask you to tell us about the different ways people can reach you, the different ways people can see you, talk to you, etc., what would you have liked me to ask you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, man. That is a tough one. I'm trying to think of the stuff I've been talking about the most. You know, I've been talking a lot about propaganda. I have a comedy special people can watch for free at leecampamerican.com. And in that, I address policing. And one of the things I talk about is how when you know, we've moved the conversation to defund the police. But I think what the conversation should get to eventually is about 90% of what police do should not be done by police. It should not be done by guys with guns who are steroided up and, you know, just sent into situations to you know, deal with a mentally ill person who's pissing in a fountain. Like, that should not be done by guys with guns. And so we need to decrease our police forces by 95%. And it should be mostly, you know, call people that have mental health training, call people that deal with traffic violations, but they don't have guns. Like, there's just so many large scale steps to our policing system is ridiculous. And I want to hear that discussion.
Excellent. Now, tell us all about where they can reach you. Give us your website, your podcast, all that good stuff, because you have a lot to add to this discussion, brother.
Yeah, I have two podcasts, free podcasts every week. One's Common Censored with Eleanor Goldfield, and a new one is called Government Secrets with Graham Elwood. Also, my TV show Redacted Tonight, everyone can get it at leecamp.com. And my Twitter's at leecamp. And like I said, I have the book, which you can find at leecampbook.com. And the new comedy special that's free for the first time is at leecampamerican.com.
Lee Camp, author of the new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. Folks, go get it. Thank you so kindly for being with us, Lee.
Appreciate it.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.